Hi folks, Lou here, and I'm going to talk about something that is not entirely subtle, but something you might not think about, and that is whether a system from one game that models particular situations can fit another game. And specifically, I'm going to talk about Britannia and other Britannia-like games. Now, when I designed Britannia, I designed the systems, especially the economic system and the combat system. And I designed those to match the circumstances in Dark Ages Britain. Now, I had to deal with the Romans, and so I had to make a lot of exceptions, unfortunately. But the Romans are very popular, so I needed to include them in there. They're a very important part of British history. So for the most part, I was designing for an agricultural system where there was very little trade, not much mining. It was a case where successful agriculture equated to a higher population, and a higher population equated to a stronger army because there were no professional armies. There were small numbers of professionals around the kings, and that was it. So I did not separately model the population. Now I tried a game that had population separately, and then when an area was conquered, the population was gradually assimilated and so on, and the population could be converted into armies and so on, and that worked pretty well, but I didn't pursue it, as is true of many of the games that I design and try out. Also, Britannia represents an era of slow migrations. You didn't have armies rampaging all over the place. You had them gradually come in and displace, whether it was the Anglo-Saxons or the Vikings. Now that's a situation that is typical of that time, but it was quite specific to Britain in some respects. And it does not fit much later eras. In particular, I'm talking about modeling gunpowder era, or especially modern kinds of eras like World War I or World War II, because some of the Britannia-like games use the Britannia system to depict, say, the English and French and so forth coming into India, or even in China, the Middle Kingdom, World War II. No, hell no. You can make a good game that way, don't get me wrong, but it won't be a good model. Professional armies, in fact, do not fit the model. And that's why I had to make those exceptions for the Romans, because they were a professional army. And I might have made more exceptions for Harold, the Norwegian, and William the Norman. I did not, but in Brit 3, the version I've been working on for a long time, I do make exceptions in some respects, because those were more or less professional armies. And of course, armies with gunpowder have a completely different situation in supply and so forth. Armies in the Dark Ages could live off the land generally, and that becomes less and less true as time passes. The economic system, of course, in the gunpowder era is much different, where trade is very important and mining can be very important and so forth. That's not represented in Britannia. For example, in B3, as I call it, there are 3 trade centers, London, York, and, well, in versions where Ireland is included, Dublin. And those are an extra economic point to reflect trade later in the era. But in general, there was no trade, or very little trade, certainly not long distance trade, and so it's not represented in the game. And yet it needs to be represented in a much more modern game. So the point here is, if I'm going to design a game for those eras, the World War II, World War I, gunpowder age, I'm going to devise a different system. I'm not going to use the Britannia system because it doesn't fit. Thanks for listening.